During the campaign, myself and many of you and a bunch of people out there were warning of the economic impacts that would come of a Trump term if America gave that to him. And see, this is the point of campaigning. You lay out your plan, and then the electorate's supposed to analyze it and say, well, either I agree with this or I don't. This could be good, this could be bad, and then vote accordingly. And despite the warnings of economists, despite the warnings from people like me, that what Trump's laying out on the campaign trail would necessarily be harmful to the economy, a bunch of people said, I don't care, charging forward, I don't believe it. Let's try Trump once again. And because of what we'd gone over, the data that led me to the conclusion that then I brought to you, I knew it was going to be bad if he were able to do some of the things he was talking about. But I don't think I knew how quickly we'd see the impact, the effect of these actions. So before getting to some breaking news economically that could spell disaster, first, what are the inputs that are creating that output? Well, here on one of Trump's recent statements on tariffs, we start to get a sense.
The European Union's it was formed in order to screw the United States. I mean, look, let's be honest. The European Union was formed in order to screw the United States. That's the purpose of it. And they've done a good job of it, but now I'm president.
What will happen if these countries or the EU retaliate?
They can't. I mean, they can try, but they can't.
China did. They
are
imposed
pledging to,
tariffs
sir.
that are.
A reminder as we go through this to click the subscribe button. A lot to look at. Before getting to what this is causing, let me remind you of the chaos that we've experienced with his policy. Then we'll get to the news I'm talking about. Then we'll look at some more clips of him speaking on this so incoherently there, him acting like it's not the case that our allies could harm us economically by retaliating. Okay, well, then you don't understand global trade. So why are you even a part of this conversation? Well, because America gave you a bunch of power for an indiscernible reason. But here is some headlines that I think portray the chaos and incoherence. This isn't a coherent approach, but it is potentially a catastrophic one. Reuters, Trump would announce these tariffs, right? And then he'd pause them. Okay, well, so never mind on Canada. But then he'd bring them back. Actually, yes, they're happening. On the lower third chyron on that Fox News report, you saw it saying April, the Mexico-Canada tariff will come back. Now it's supposed to be tomorrow. And then you have headlines like this, clock's ticking down. Mexico vows retaliation. Trump says that couldn't harm us. Yes, it could. China is eyeing U.S. farm exports for retaliation. And in response to that, I guess Trump posted to the great farmers of the United States, get ready to start making a lot of agricultural product to be sold inside of the United States because we're going to be cut off for many of our trading partners if we continue this behavior and them buying from us, which is a really important economic stimulator for us. Tariffs will go on external product on April 2nd. Have fun. We're not having fun. Have fun. No. U.S. tariffs will likely dent growth prospects in Central Europe. Now he's talking about the EU. He says it was created to screw the United States. That's not true. As you see in this headline, Canadians are now replacing U.S. products while shopping, especially groceries. Again, this is hurting U.S. companies that sell to consumers abroad. The Trump administration sets the stage for large-scale federal worker layoffs and a new memo, so exacerbating the economic problems that come from his tariff approach. He's then having the largest employer in the United States lay off a bunch of people, the federal government, with really no rhyme or reason. That's causing even more inefficiencies because these programs aren't functioning as intended. Then Mother Jones reporting Trump administration makes a new push to speed up deportations. You start pushing out workers to exacerbate these economic problems. NIH funding freeze stalls applications on $1.5 billion in medical research funds as an example of how money that was lawfully allocated to different research institutions, or here you have colleges, that's being cut off. That's causing more negative impacts economically. Trump's attempts to freeze grant funding leaves nonprofits reeling. You have nonprofits in limbo. Are we going to have to lay people off? And so what is this causing? That plus a bunch of other things, the tariff approach, the deportations, the mass layoffs, the chaos of it all. It's not just the policy, but how he'll go, yes, no, hate you, love you. And this causes our allies or our trading partners to go, I don't even know if he's going to go through on some of this, but we need to isolate a little bit from this mess. We need to encourage our citizens to not buy from the United States. We need to do what we can to protect ourselves from the United States instead of continuing our strong intertwinement that benefits us economically. It's one of the reasons that economically we are the world's sole superpower. Then you have Fortune reporting on something we already talked about. The U.S. economy has suddenly been thrown into reverse as key GDP indicator flashes stunning negative forecast. So this, again, we already mentioned this, but I have an update. The Atlanta Fed's GDP tracker now indicates that the economy is headed for a 1.5% contraction in the first quarter after showing a 2.3% growth just days earlier. So Biden hands the economy to Trump, and the expectation is, all right, Q1, we're going to see some solid growth, steady growth. And now this is a forecast, but it's just tracking the data as it comes in before you can get a full retrospective analysis. And it's saying, wait, we went from expecting 2.3% growth, and now we're looking at negative. And now the update. Atlanta Fed model forecast nearly negative 3%. It was just, as you saw, negative 1.5%. Now it's nearly doubled in just days. Negative 3% GDP growth in first quarter of this year. A model utilized by the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta updated Monday to forecast an even steeper economic contraction after first showing negative growth in its update last Friday. The Atlanta Fed's GDP Now model had up until the February 28 update been forecasting growth between 2 and 4%. In line with most other models, a graph on the GDP Now page lists the blue chip consensus average of the top 10 and bottom 10 forecasts at a slight tick more than 2% US GDP growth for Q1. But the February 28th update ultimately, as you saw, went to negative 1.5, and now it's updated with an even more pessimistic outlook, negative 2.8%. Could we see a negative 2.8% contraction? GDP wise, which would genuinely spell disaster. That is not what you want to see when we had a steady, strong economy. And we'll be diving into to really understand what impacted what, this went there, this as we get more data. And again, this is just forecasting based on the day-to-day analyses, but we'll get the full look post Q1, and then we'll have a better chance to diagnose what's happening. But it seems pretty clear that we were on a steady course, and then Trump came in with a wrecking ball, and the natural outcome of that we're now seeing signs of. It all will take a second, and we'll be following every step of the way. I hope this is wrong, but we could see, instead of growth, we could see a contraction. We could see loss in GDP. But you might be thinking, Luke, surely Trump is doing something for the everyday, hardworking Americans. Surely he's doing something to make your life and my life better. Well, he's doing this. Pentagon directs removal of trans service members from military. Is that what you're talking about? No, instead of actually working to counteract the damage that he's doing, instead, he's saying, if you willingly would give your life to this country, but you happen to be trans, get out! Which is incoherent, which doesn't make any sense given that they've talked about caring about the recruiting problem with the military, but now they're saying people who want to be in, get out just because we don't like your identity. My goodness. Now, remember this, because the president you're supposed to look to in a time of uncertainty for answers. But when he's looked to for answers, we get far more confused.
Let's see here. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Earlier today, you told me that you believe that foreign countries pay tariffs, but Americans who are concerned about higher prices believe, as most people do, that they're paid by consumers and importers when they import things into this country. Can you explain how you came to this belief that foreign governments are paying tariffs? And for the Prime Minister, did you discuss with President Trump his repeated statements of desire to annex Canada? And has the King expressed any concern over the President's apparent desire to remove one of his realms from his control?
So I'll go ahead. The first part, the tariffs are necessary because we've been treated very unfairly by many, many countries, including our friends, friend and foe. But we've been treated very unfairly in trade at levels that nobody's really ever seen before, and especially under the Biden administration, they really took it.
Okay, just remember, there are issues with certain trade policies. There have been incorrect ones that have been made. There is wild inequality in who benefits from the wealth of the United States. All that stands. That isn't fixed by the economic destabilization that Trump is pushing forward. And if we could have especially better tax structure and social programs funded by that better tax structure, we could address the inequality while also benefiting from the prosperity. But that prosperity has been built on the United States' role in facilitating global trade. And so a world where the United States is isolated sees far less prosperity, which means we have much less. Right now, we have this crazy amount of wealth distributed not as effectively as it should be, but a crazy amount of wealth. And that is absolutely in large part because of the global trade system that we've been a huge player in pushing forward. So as Trump seeks to isolate us, that would be harmful to each and every one of us if he really got his way, which he speaks as if he thinks, even though this is logistically impossible, we should fulfill all of our consumer needs. All within the United States. All production and consumption should all just be in the United States.
Advantage of the United States. I put massive tariffs on China during my 4 years. We had the best economy in the history of our country. Probably the best economy, maybe the best economy in the history of the world. And I used tariffs to even things up. And in particular with China, we took it.
So his tariff policy there was nothing to the extent of what we're seeing now. It's just a silly thing to bring up given what he's talking about in this term, and the economic metrics, as we've reviewed so many times, that he tries to take credit for are an obvious aftermath of the economy he inherited.
In hundreds of billions of dollars, and we had no inflation. And it's a myth.
There was inflation. It wasn't as high as it got after the pandemic, after you bungled the handling of it, but there was inflation.
A myth that's put out there by foreign countries that really don't like paying tariffs, and especially to even up. So we've been treated badly.
And there, of course, while negative impacts can come for foreign countries when you disincentivize buying from other countries through tariff policy, true, the tariff is something U.S. companies have to pay. He always says it the opposite while calling it a myth that the very definition of a tariff is what it is. He's saying that's just a myth created by foreign. Well, whenever your administration charges forward with enforcing these tariffs, you're going to either learn or you're going to have yourself disproven if you're lying on how you articulate this. And so if you look through everything we went through and you're concerned, and you should be, and it really could spell trouble. If you're concerned and you're thinking, well, let's get answers from Donald. He still doesn't know what a tariff is, so I don't think you're going to get those answers. Share your thoughts in the comments. Support the show. Get the members only bonus show by clicking that join button below.